Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Uri Kogan, and I'm here with Dean Stanberry. I'm on the product team at R0, and among other things, responsible for our indoor air quality monitoring offering. And I'm very excited that we're here with Dean. Dean is the immediate past chair of IFMA's board of directors, so he has a very extensive and rich experience dealing with the kinds of issues we'll be discussing today. Dean, do you want to give a few words of introduction about yourself and your experience as relates to indoor air quality monitoring and HVAC systems in commercial buildings?
Certainly. Thank you, Uri. I've been in operations my entire career. I actually started out in IT. I spent 22 years in a large telecom company running mainframe data centers and various other things. And then I had my accidental profession story because nobody ever joined facility management on purpose. You did it by accident. I took a right turn into commercial real estate facilities and was there ever since. And as a result, I also figured out I needed to learn a little bit more about office building because I knew a lot about critical infrastructure. I found this organization called IFMA, the International Facilities Management Association, joined the Denver chapter, started taking some classes. One day they were looking for volunteers to help out on a committee, and I raised my hand and apparently couldn't stop raising my hand because I ended up as the chairman of their global board of directors for a year, which is very nice. And so now I'm still on the executive committee as the immediate past chair. But I've always been in operations. I've run a variety of organizations. I've worked for facility management outsourcers as well as for corporations. I'm still doing some work for the federal government, General Services Administration, helping them with their maintenance management system. So yeah, I've had my share of experiences there.
Wonderful. And I neglected to say up front what you hear on every single webinar, which is that we're very interested in taking your questions and bringing them into the conversation. Please, either in the chat, which I see somebody's already found, or in the Q&A panel as we're talking, please add your questions or comments, and we'll do our best to incorporate them as well in the conversation. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into the Q&A that we've prepared so that we can get through as much of that as we can. So Dean, I wanted to start, our focus today is on indoor air quality, indoor environmental quality, and how that kind of data is playing a greater role in managing commercial real estate effectively. So I wanted to start maybe just that you can tell us a little bit about some examples of how that kind of data is being used today.
Certainly, IAQ or IEQ, depending on your preference, it's increasingly being leveraged to enhance that tenant experience by promoting health, comfort, and productivity. Facility managers are more and more using real time monitoring systems to gather data on various measures, including things like CO2 levels, particulate matter, VOCs, temperature, humidity, lighting, acoustics, etc. And then that data is analyzed to optimize the building performance to ensure that indoor environments are operating within those ideal ranges for occupant well being. For example, adjustments to an HVAC system can be made automatically based on that IAQ data to maintain that optimal air quality, reducing the risk of health issues. And then there's more personalized comfort settings now. We're seeing that are becoming more common, allowing occupants to customize their immediate environment for like temperature and lighting to suit their preferences. And for transparency, this data is now often being shared with tenants through dashboards or mobile apps, making it a proactive approach to improve that occupant satisfaction and contributes to some higher retention rates. A healthier and more comfortable environment, it's a significant value add to the building owners and to the occupants.
So I think historically, a lot of buildings have had a practice of checking these things from time to time, maybe as part of a recommissioning. But what we've seen certainly, and you just mentioned, increasing focus on continuous monitoring. As that has changed to a more continuous basis, what are you seeing in terms of either innovations that make that easier to do or the value of continuous monitoring over the more infrequent approaches that have been taken in the past?
Um, Continuous monitoring is essential to ensure that wellness and well-being of occupants is there. The technology has really evolved rapidly over the past decade, more than anything. So just that rapid expansion of sensors everywhere. And now we're finding more and more things we can do with those sensors and incorporating them into real-time systems that can not only monitor and tell you there's a problem, but many of them can communicate with the actual mechanical systems to affect change. So doing that micro monitoring or management of systems to make that change. So that's probably the one thing that I would say that has happened most recently, and we're still learning. The facility management, commercial real estate's the last industry to go digital. It slept through the first 30 years of digital transformation, woke up about 5 years ago. And as a consequence, we don't have as many people as we need to understand systems and data analytics and data management that goes along with it. It's still an evolution in the profession.
Makes sense. Now, you shared with me a story that I'd love you to share with everybody else about a building that you worked with or supported that didn't have a continuous monitoring. It had monitoring, infrequent monitoring, and some issues with that came up. And I thought it'd be great to hear that story and then reflect on that relative to what's possible today.
Yeah, this is, I call it more of a cautionary tale than a maybe a success story. I had a responsibility, some bi-coastal responsibilities for facility management outsource organization. And for my client, I was always doing checks on maintenance work, especially for some of the critical infrastructure across the country, just doing my due diligence, make sure that we're doing all the right things. And one day I was looking at some water treatment work orders for one particular location, and I noticed something odd. I was looking at 3 months worth of the field service reports that came out of those, and they looked strangely similar. In fact, they looked absolutely identical. So I went back and I checked a whole year's worth, and come to find out the field service reports themselves were just copies. The signature and the date had changed, but everything else was absolutely identical. So to go back and verify that, I went to the security logs for that building and I found out that the water treatment technician had not been to the building in over a year. So that caused me some concern because we have a large building, a large cooling tower. As if you don't keep those things, water treatment is there to reduce the incidence of bacteria like Legionella. And of course, if you're not treating the water, it can also cause damage to the equipment itself. So I contacted the company, laid out my evidence that nothing had happened, and insisted that they bring in an independent company to assess the water quality, the water treatment system, and the cooling tower system itself. Fortunately, there was only some minor issues which they paid to get taken care of. And I confronted the chief engineer who reported to me on this. And I said, how does it that we went for a year and didn't catch this? Needless to say, there was a little embarrassment going on there. Apparently, it had been said he was looking at the reports, but unless you looked at them side by side, you might not have noticed that they were duplicates. But the other problem with that was that we had no proof of service. There was nothing that told us that it was being done. The other thing is that we didn't have any kind of real time monitoring to look for potential changes in the water quality. We can now test that water to see whether there's the water treatment chemicals. Is there sufficient presence in there? And we would have noticed that if we had a real time capability of seeing that difference. So today, I don't think we would see that kind of abuse. That was something. Fortunately, we did not have any occupant issues with that. That continuous monitoring of indoor air and environmental quality is really essential to ensure that wellness and well-being of occupants, and that poor air quality and inappropriate temperatures and high noise levels have been associated with a range of issues, including absenteeism and decreased cognitive function and higher tenant turnover rates. The World Green Building Council issued a report indicating improved IEQ through better ventilation, lighting, and acoustics can lead to a 35% reduction in short term sick leave. This reduction in absenteeism can be linked to that in healthier indoor environment that minimizes exposure to pollutants and other stressors. And there's another study from Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health in 2017. They examined real world office environments and found that workers in green certified buildings, which typically have higher IEQ, perform 26% better on cognitive function tests. So those studies highlight that even modest improvements in indoor air quality can lead to significant enhancement in cognitive performance. So lots of evidence that this is worth doing. And I'll just share, since something that not everybody can see, this is a CO2 monitor that I happen to have on my desk. 832 or 823 is it's on there is not bad. Anything over 1,000, you start getting cognitive impairment. But the door to my office is closed and my four-legged office mate is in here with me and increasing the CO2 levels.
You're causing me to wonder. I'm in Boston at the moment in a hotel room. I have no idea what the CO2 level is here, but you're causing me to wonder what it is at home where I do have a monitor. So I'm gonna have to look that up before the end of the session and compare notes. But yeah, that's great. Takeaways from that story really is trust but verify. And if you have a system that is constantly giving you data, you have an ability to discover anomalies much, much sooner than if you're looking at a report once a month and maybe not, it's not easy to notice that it's actually the same thing because you only see it every 30 days. So that makes a lot of sense. I think the other thing that maybe a little bit different from in air versus water is the effect of outdoor weather conditions, changes in occupancy. There are things that are fluctuating quite a bit more throughout the course of even a single day, perhaps that affects the air quality even more so than water. So I think the importance is pretty clear. So let's talk about how this kind of monitoring can help improve the energy efficiency of the space. What are your thoughts on that?
It's certainly linked to maintaining energy efficiency. Sorry, I've got a dog over my shoulder now. Because it enables more precise control over the building systems, such as the mechanical, lighting, and ventilation. So the continuous measurement is enabling us to make those adjustments in real time. In the past, what we had was we programmed systems. And so they were just programmed to either try to maintain a static temperature value without really any knowledge of whether anybody's in the building or not, because we didn't know. There was no technology to give us that telemetry and tell us. You might have had a security system that told you, yes, 20 people entered the building, but you didn't know where they were after that. So we couldn't micro manage those values and therefore improve that overall energy efficiency. So HVAC systems can mostly be optimized to provide that adequate ventilation and temperature control only when and where it's needed, reducing unnecessary energy consumption. And by identifying areas where energy is being wasted, such as overcooling and overheating, real time monitoring can inform targeted energy conservation measures, including but not limited to grading insulation or recalibrating systems. So those measures reduce operating cost and lower the building's carbon footprint.
One of the things we often get asked about when we talk to folks in the market about energy efficiency in conjunction with indoor air quality is a fear or concern about perhaps impacting comfort by taking too great an action to turn down the HVAC system. I think the first thing that people think of is, sure, I can save energy if I turn down the AC in the summer or turn down the heat in the winter, but my complaints are going to go up. So, how do you balance the energy efficiency potential with keeping people comfortable?
It is exactly that. It's a balance of energy efficiency practices that don't compromise the quality of the indoor environment. And that's only through real time monitoring can we dynamically respond to the changes in the occupancy and the environmental conditions. So ventilation systems can increase airflow when the CO2 level rises, maintaining that air quality without running at full capacity when it's not needed. And temperature and lighting adjustments can be fine tuned to meet occupancy preferences only when the space is in use and ensuring that comfort without energy waste. So the approach ensures decarbonization efforts can coexist with occupant well-being.
That makes sense. So, I guess let's talk specifically about some of the strategies that a building owner can implement if they are measuring air quality on a continuous basis. What have you seen be effective approaches? Where would you start? How would you advise somebody who is interested in this and wants to know what the next steps are for them?
First and foremost is you can't manage what you don't measure. Advanced IAQ monitoring systems. So the sensors that are continuously monitoring the air quality for all of those different values, the CO2 levels, the volatile organic compounds or VOCs, particulate matter, humidity. The real time data collection allows for that immediate detection and correction of those issues. But you need high efficiency HVAC systems or mechanical systems equipped with advanced filtration, such as HEPA filters or UVC light treatment. I actually have that in my own house to remove those airborne contaminants and improve that overall air quality. Demand controlled ventilation systems that can adjust ventilation rates based on occupancy and IAQ levels. So in some cases, the temperature might be fine, but you still need to move more air if you got more people in there. I also have that in my house. My HVAC system varies the fan in the system to keep the air moving. So even though it's not heating or cooling, it's still moving air all the time. You want to look at use of low emission materials. So this goes into more into purchasing. You try to buy furnishings, cleaning products that have low or no VOCs, reduce those concentrations of harmful chemicals in that indoor environment. That goes back to even just some of the maintenance practices. If you're putting in new furniture or you're doing some work that might involve some VOCs, you might need to increase that number of air changes for a short period over a weekend or over a day or two. Instead of 3 air changes per hour, which I think is ASHRAE's minimum value, you might go to 6 and try to get the air quality up faster than it would normally occur. Things like biophilic design elements, integrating plants and natural materials into the building, it assists in purifying the air and it's a more pleasant environment. You're not in this sterile cubicle kind of thing. You have some plants to look at. Maintenance is, of course, a big part of it. That's been part of my experience through my entire career is you want to make sure that you're conducting the manufacturer recommended maintenance of the systems, cleaning and replacing those filters, doing the periodic IAQ audits to make sure that the air quality remains high if you're not doing continuous monitoring. And last but not least, it's education and transparency. You want to provide tenants with access to the data, having a dashboard that shows them what is their current temperature, what is the CO2 levels, what's it been over the last 24 hours, what's the outside air quality, just helping them make choices for themselves. After all, I don't remember the exact number, but we spend an inordinate amount of our life indoors, and I'm sure we could look it up, but it's a high percentage of our time is spent either in your home or in an office building. That's the majority of humans. It's something that we didn't think about. It's been elevated, I think, post pandemic, sort of raised the awareness for people about what's going on in their indoor environment. Air is something you don't see. You can't necessarily tell. You might smell something bad in it, but whether it was transmitting COVID, you couldn't tell. So people became more or hyper aware, I think, of that indoor environment and how healthy is it for them. So then they're now more interested in knowing those things.
We certainly consume a lot of it. I do wanna highlight what is your dog's name?
His name is
Kona. So your Kona is the unexpected star of the show today. He's getting lots of love on the in the comments. So thank you for gracing us with your presence, Kona. So I just want to highlight a couple things that you mentioned just now, or underline them maybe, because a number of folks have mentioned things like energy audits or third party validation on a regular basis. I think I want to highlight the accessibility of continuous monitoring has gotten much, much better. It's much less expensive and more accessible now to do this, which means that rather than relying on quite expensive and definitely infrequent activities like a third party validation or an energy audit, you now have the ability to have continuous view into what may be going on. I'm not saying that those activities are also valuable, but whether it is helping to run a scheme like demand control ventilation, you obviously need to be measuring how many people are in your space, whether you're doing that with CO2 or occupancy sensors. If you are going to go to low emissions materials, talks about retrofits or changing out the furniture, you know, being able to validate that changes have actually cleared out any off-gassing from those materials, and the space is ready to be reoccupied. Being able to identify proactively maintenance issues. Hey, it looks like these filters need to be replaced because we're seeing a spike in particulate matter or some other pollutant. And even just making sure that your spaces are serving your occupants. We increasingly are familiar and aware of neurodivergent populations, but even before that, we all know that some people like it quiet, some people like it loud, some people like it dim, some people like it bright, and maybe the same person has different preferences depending on the day or the time of day. And so having a more understanding of the kinds of spaces that are available, how they're performing, can make sure that the right person can be in the right space at the right time, and all of your spaces are meeting your desired performance as regards air quality and environmental quality like noise and light. I think it's important to highlight the fact that having that continuous monitoring can really add richness to the way that you're able to provide a good environment for whoever's occupying your building. There was also a question about schools, and I wanted to touch on that, or maybe ask you to touch on that, and then I can touch on that. How do the question specifically is how do indoor air quality solutions benefit schools?
I think I might have saw it here in one of the chat questions. Sorry, my puppy is wanting to play for some reason. He's usually asleep by now. In the Harvard study conducted by Dr. Joe Allen, they talked about going out and doing some studies in schools where they would go into classrooms and they would do some indoor air quality monitoring. And in one classroom, I think they highlighted that they went in and they measured CO2 levels around 5,000. Now, I don't know how they could remember their name, no less learn anything at that high a CO2 level. And what was the problem? They're in a classroom. It's an old building. The windows do not open.
Yeah.
The door is closed. They have twice as many occupants as they were probably rated for because we've increased classroom sizes. And they probably had systems that were not continuously, if it wasn't heating or cooling, it wasn't moving air. So older systems that haven't been updated. That's something to be aware of and why some people have purchased these now readily available CO2 monitors to go in and see what is it like in this environment. Um, and I think that's a cautionary tale as well, is like, how do we expect students to learn in that sort of environment? It does impede your cognitive abilities. You might not perceive it as an individual, but it does have an impact on it. I think it's for parents, and they should be looking at that and prioritizing where that school district is spending some of their money.
I,
Was teachers and resources and paper and pencils all are needed. They got to have an environment where learning is enabled.
Yeah, I would also add to that from our own experience working with schools. For example, a school that we were installing indoor air quality monitoring in and discovered that some classrooms are overcooling in the morning relative to others. And that's just a case of the set points needing to be corrected because maybe those classrooms don't get as much solar gain as the others. So they don't need quite as much free cooling. And that's just a straight up cost savings and energy savings for them. That's not really specific to a educational institution specifically, but it's certainly an area where there's a benefit in any kind of classroom or campus setting. Another question that came up was monitoring equipment. Since this is a webinar from R0, I have to take the opportunity to advertise slightly that
All right.
we provide an air quality monitor and the dashboard for viewing data. That monitor is easily installed anywhere, and there's parameters around where you want to measure air quality, but it's very easy to install, connect to the Wi-Fi, and have that data available to you right away. So if you want to know more about that, please do reach out to us. I know we're at time, so I do want to wrap it up and thank everybody for joining. And if we didn't get to your question, we have them all recorded and we'll come back to you after the fact and answer those questions. But thank you all for joining, and thank you, Dean and Prona as well for and sharing your wisdom and your experience. And with that, we will wrap it up and hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their Wednesday.
Right. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, everybody.